Awesome. It's pretty stacked altogether. What brought you to HitBox to begin with?
That's a good question. I remember, if you guys are familiar with the name Hitbox Sora, there was a time when I was in Dallas, Texas. That's kind of when I found the FGC, became a prominent Street Fighter player and whatnot. But during that phase, that transitional point of me becoming a young idiot into growing brain cells and understanding what the hell is going on in a fighting game, I saw this guy walk into our local arcade, called Versus Gameplay, and he had this contraption that I'd never seen in my life. It was just, he had all buttons, and I was like, okay, that's weird. And then I remember playing casual somewhere, and I just heard someone hitting a bunch of buttons. Like, who is mashing in the corner? But it was just him, just moving around. And so I remember talking to him for a little bit. Some time passed, and then eventually I tried the controller. I tried it. I didn't really understand it. And I'm sure we'll talk about the other stuff about how I got into esports and working in esports after this. So that's important as far as me getting on Hitbox officially. But meeting him was the reason I even knew what Hitbox was. And then he kind of empowered me into actually trying it and getting better with it and educating me on that.
I mean, it sounds like you got pretty darn good at it. And even though it is such a foreign thing to think about, just going from old school fight stick stuff over to what might as well be like Mavis Beacon teaches typing, just kind of rattling away at the buttons. But like, I mean, people get really, really darn good at that, and it goes across all games. It goes from Street Fighter to Tekken, and even like some buttonless players in Melee. That are doing quite well with leverless controllers. What is it that really appeals to you about that? Because obviously Hitbox, like there are a lot of leverless setups out there, a lot of companies doing that, but Hitbox is the one that started it all. What is it that appeals to you? Like, what is it that makes it the best?
So what is it that makes it the best? Precision. I've always been very heavy into precision. I think it's just part of my nature. I do well with information. I do well with knowing how the pieces work and then practicing and making sure that it's optimal. If I don't, then I'm very sloppy. When I first tried a hitbox, I immediately understood that I was able to get what I wanted to when I wanted to. Most of the time where I made mistakes, even in the learning phase, I could clearly see as a player what was my fault. This was my fault. The controller definitely, there's no question about where I am, right? So to kind of make a point, a lot of people who play on fight stick, especially the ones who play on the default gate, which is usually a square gate, they usually have a hard time finding, let's say, cardinal directions. So neutral up, neutral down, neutral left, neutral right, especially in the middle of a motion. So starting from neutral is a little bit easier, but usually it's a little bit, sketchy about where is forward exactly in my quarter circle, right? Where have I hit forward? Where have I overextended and now I'm jumping?
Because
And
when
I
you're
put
moving
on an
around so
octagate.
much, then you can maybe get a little disoriented, especially in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, and especially when there are transitions with no clear point, right? No clear indication that you have transitioned from one to
Right.
another. That there's something that's released, like the down is released, and now you're only on left, or you're only on right.
Yeah, yeah,
So
okay.
with that, I only played on Octagate when I started. I was lucky enough to start on an Octagate. It was a very worn out Octagate. It was basically a circle gate. You could barely feel the notches on there, but it was an Octagate. It was just enough for me to get used to it. And I remember when I put on a square gate for the first time, I thought to myself, I can't find forward. I can't find left or down. I just can't find any of it. So I got a new Octagate in my fight stick, and I was like, oh, it's just the gate. I thought maybe I was doing something wrong, but I didn't know about fight gates at the time. So I got an Octagate, and then my precision was better. Now here's the thing: most people will tell you that a square gate is optimal because you could find all the angles. There are situations where it has advantages, but for me, I've already practiced. My inputs were pristine on Octagate. Truly, they were. Like I didn't have any missed inputs, nothing like that.
You said starting out
So
it was a luxury. So
it helped me learn how to be precise. So for me, that was kind of like my starting point. And then when I tried a hitbox, it was like the next level to that. It's like, oh, I really know where I am. There is absolutely no question that I am either pressing this button or I'm not. There's no stick deciding that for me, right? My fingers are doing it. And then more so, I get access to pressing multiple directions at the same time, like cardinal directions that are opposing, right? The SOCD. And that was kind of like my deciding point. I didn't know when I would switch. I didn't know how long it would take, but I knew that I would prefer to play on that controller. That's all I knew at the time.
Yeah, it makes sense because when you're playing guitar, you'll kind of have maybe one finger, like when you're pressing down on the fret, you'll have one finger dedicated to like a certain string or like having to move it down, so that like even if you're like going up and down the fretboard, you'll know kind of what's being pressed just because of what finger you're using. So I guess having that translate to fighting games makes a lot more sense than perhaps would one would think right offhand. And really, with the level of success that people have reached with hitboxes, I mean, it stands to reason that that the precision that you mentioned would be put into practice.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I think that the appeal for Fight Stick for a lot of people is that it is fun to play on a joystick. It's just intuitively fun. You just like moving it around, but also it is it does reward sloppier inputs. Fight Stick does, right? So you can kind of get away with a little bit of more slop, especially in like the more modern games.
That's
And
me.
because of the gates, right? Right, and you
I'll
can
be
kind of
honest, I'm
you
a
can afford to
grappler. I just want to
overextend,
churn
right?
butter, man. But
Well, exactly. Like since you play like grapplers, you know exactly what I mean. It's
yeah,
not intuitive to play like a Zangief on a hitbox. It really isn't. It's the weirdest thing. But once you start to understand it, you see it. Oh, this is actually cheap. This is extremely cheap. But doing just a regular SPD alone, if you don't have the information, it's gonna feel impossible.
yeah, or like or third strike or whatever. Because I mean, I play a Hugo. I mean, you're telling me to parry in 720, you have to hit the keys in the right combination, to ba bra bra, and
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you've just red parried into the press. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's a little insane to think about that, and I really feel like if I grind it, maybe I could get it. But let's talk about the